how do we set ourselves up for success and happiness without killing ourselves along the way?
Honestly, it always goes back to your own life goals, because if if you turn your own life goals into your company's life goals, guess what? Your work life balance is going to be non-existent. It's impossible. You know this. There's a company is a living, breathing thing, and its only mission in life is to grow, scale, and eat up all of its competitors. Right? I mean, for the most part, that's why businesses exist, at least in a
Yeah.
capitalistic country, right? So if you don't shut that part off in your brain, you're never going to stop.
And we're back for another episode of the Startup Hustle. This is your host, Matt Watson. Today, very excited to be joined by Michael Motamedi, who is a serial entrepreneur, done a whole bunch of different things, serial traveler, podcast host of the No Fixed Address podcast. But today, we're going to be talking about some of the struggles of being an entrepreneur, the real world work-life balance, burnout, all of it. Something that I can definitely relate to and I've been struggling with recently myself. So this might be self-therapy. Before we get started, I do want to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by Fullscale, which is my company. We have over 300 employees to do all kinds of software development, whatever your tech stack is, front end, back end, mobile, QA, whatever it is. Check us out at fullscale.io. Michael, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You know, one of my favorite things about you is you're an avid traveler. So I guess I have to ask you, where in the world are you today?
I'm actually in Los Angeles, finally came touchdown to visit the family, but only for about a month. And then I'm on the road again. I've been traveling full time for 2 years straight.
That's incredible. So is that part of your podcast? Like, tell us a little bit about your podcast real quick.
Yeah, well, first of all, you just told me you did 1,300 episodes. That is freaking amazing, man. Kudos to you. That is a big feat. I'm on episode number 6. But yeah, the podcast is extremely special in a way, unique in a way, because we are a traveling podcast. We don't have a studio. We mostly do not do remote. We are in the country, in the city, in the village, in wherever it may be, where this extraordinary person that we're interviewing does what they do best. And it's kind of hilarious. Like, we'll be walking around with a carry-on and literally be inside someone's home or on the side of some village. The last podcast that we did was in the Philippines, and we were on the side of a side street on a gambling table.
Wow. Is this video too?
It's all the video is on social, but the podcast lives everywhere else audio wise.
I mean, being remote like this, like, I think it'd be cool to see the video of the gambling table and the whole thing. Like, I feel like I'd want to see that on YouTube.
Yeah, so because we're on the road, it's difficult to have like this wide angle shot of everything. So all the shots are done specifically for social. It's done with iPhones and GoPros.
Yeah.
And it's just literally vertical, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's in this day and age, it's good enough. I mean, the cameras are good enough. Well, I know. So I'm really excited to talk about work-life balance today and the struggles of that. And I would love it if you give like a real quick your background as an entrepreneur, so people kind of understand where you're coming from. You've done a lot of different things. It doesn't sound like a lot of them have been tech related, right? You've been a lot of other types of businesses.
Yeah, most of my businesses have been things that I've fallen in love with, whether that may be restaurants or physical products, CPG. I cut my teeth very early on. I went to university for econ to be a finance guy like my father. Took econ 101. I was like, hell no, this is not going to happen. Ended up taking philosophy to become a lawyer. During that period, ended up starting a couple small businesses and barely finished my philosophy degree. And fast forward, I would guess maybe around 5 or 6 years, 7 years. And then I ended up moving to Kentucky to help start a bourbon company. Very early on, I would say we started selling whiskey in 17. The distillery was finished in 19, and I think or 18, and we sold in 20 or 19.
So Before we started recording, you were talking about, you'd done all these things as an entrepreneur, and today you're focused more on work-life balance. You're traveling the world, you're doing all this stuff now. And you said the thing that resonated well with me. It's like a lot of times as an entrepreneur, you're working 10 or 12 hours a day, you're grinding it out, you're trying to do whatever it takes to make this business work. And now you've decided, you know what, work-life balance is important to me. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we like to, because it's easier, but we like to separate our company goals with our life goals. And as I've gotten older, and I think as many people get older, you realize that your goals are should, in my opinion, might be a little bit controversial to most entrepreneurs, should be the same. What are we doing this for? Right? Are we doing this for our own happiness? Are we doing this for our own legacy? Are we doing this for our own ego? There might be a plethora of reasons why we like to create and build companies of this magnitude, such as yourself, right? And I think better understanding what those goals are and maybe merging them with your own life goals, whether that's spending more time with your family or your wife so you don't end up divorced and your kids hating you, or or maybe your kids growing up and not really knowing who you are as a person. They might know you as dad, but do they know Matt? Do they know Michael? I think these are all very important things to ask yourself when you're starting a company or when you're building a company.
Well, so I really like this advice because maybe it's counterintuitive. Because usually we'd say, look, we should separate work and we should separate personal life, and they should be separate. But we know as an entrepreneur that isn't really the case. So if you actually take and put the goals together, then you can make sure that the personal goals, and the work goals, like combined, make sense for both, right? Because if what you're trying to do is of no value to your wife and kids, or whatever, right? It's like, why do we have these goals? Like, they don't really align to personal goals either. So I actually like that, but it's counterintuitive, wouldn't you say? Like, most people wouldn't think about it that way. They would actually think these need to be separate.
It's interesting because I 100% agree. But when you ask an entrepreneur to shut off the work and turn on the life, what do they say?
It's not possible.
Exactly. Right. So when it comes to actual physical or emotional or time being spent, the immediate reaction is to say, well, no, this is my life. My company is my life. Well, if that's the case, then how come your goals don't align all the time?
I like that a lot. And for me, I spend a lot of time in the Philippines, and like for me, one of the goals could be like, hey, I get to take my family to the Philippines. Like, that's one of my work goals, is like I get to go to the company, holiday party. I get to go in the summer and take my kids and go do these things. And for me, those would be a couple of the goals that kind of align both together.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, Matt, what's kind of come to fruition in my mind is this concept of the happiness threshold. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody use the term, so I'm kind of coining it a little bit, but it's this idea of finding out what your happiness threshold is, right? And I might be in a different, maybe, I guess, position in my life or cycle in my life where happiness is my number one goal. Money is not, growth is not, legacy is not, happiness is. And so finding out what that happiness threshold is for me is the most important thing, right? Where do you live in that happiness threshold? And guess what? Most of the time, it's going to be based off of money, unfortunately. Okay. And what I mean by that is, do you need the private jet? Do you need the Rari? Do you need the Lambo?
Yes.
What do you need?
Yes.
Do you need to just live in a
Yes.
van and travel America? Dude, everyone's different, right? Find out what that is. And for me at this stage of my life is like live that. Because there were many times in my life where the money was important, the legacy was important, the private jet was important, or at least I thought it was. And I would spend 10, 12 hours a day hunting for that private jet. And I don't know what happened during those years.
So your point here is identify for yourself what you need to achieve that would make you happy, right? Like, is it buying a Ferrari? Is it buying a vacation house or whatever it is? Identify what the threshold is. But I feel like the problem is it's always a moving target. Like we always want what we don't have, right? Like we want a sports car, we go buy a Corvette, and then we're like, oh, that's not good enough. Now I need to have a Maserati, and then I get the Maserati, like no, now I need a Ferrari, and now it's like now I need multiple Ferraris, right? Like I think that's part of our problem as humans, though, right? We always want more. Like we can't like accept what we have.
It's true, but I think as time goes on and the definition of success is changing rapidly, and you're seeing people like Will Smith do interviews, and he's saying, I was able to buy anything I wanted, anything I wanted in the world, and I realized that none of it made me happy, right?
one Hundred
And
percent.
so, right, and so if you have that mindset and you have an understanding of that mindset, maybe when you buy your first Ferrari and then your second Ferrari, and then you realize, no, all I need is a Prius. That might be the conversation that you want to have with yourself. And I'm not saying that necessarily, it's just an analogy, right? I'm a car guy myself, but I think the point of the matter is that we are very willing to take advice from gurus or marketing experts or someone to sell us a course to be able to, be successful in life and how to make the most amount of money. But we don't really listen at the end of the day to all of the people who have lived on this earth. And if I read this article about a year ago, I believe, and it did change my life, Matt. It was by a doctor who is a hospice doctor, and I can't remember it verbatim, but she basically was stating that everybody on their deathbed, 90% of the people on their deathbed have the same three things that they say. One, I should have spent more time with my family. Two, I should have done things my way, right? And three, I should have literally like I don't remember what the third one was, but point of the matter is this idea that all these people are having the same three regrets on their deathbed. No one said, I should have bought more Ferraris.
Well, and it's 100% true. And going back to your happiness threshold, let's talk about that more for a minute. So your point is like you should define what that is, and then use that as your goal, and then try to obtain it. You know what? How do you think people should use this threshold?
So there's twofold, right? I think for a lot of younger individuals, it's used as a beacon, right? How do I get there? How do I
We all
attain
need a
that?
goal. We
Oh,
all want a goal.
yeah, I think goals are very, very important. I'm not dismissing that in any way. And I think defining your happiness threshold is a very, very easy way of understanding where you're trying to get to, right? But there's a lot of individuals like ourselves who have maybe started and sold multiple companies, who might be in the middle of deciding whether they want to sell their company or not, or keep it and leave it, or deciding to replace themselves with another individual, right? If you can define your happiness threshold, it'll give you the ability to better understand why you're doing what you're doing. It's always the why for me. I think that might stem back to my philosophy background, right? Why are we doing it? If we have an understanding of why we're doing it, then it becomes clear for us. Let's say legacy is your thing, right? Well, guess what? You're going to have to stick to it for the rest of your life. And then you're going to have to pass it down to your kids and set it up in a way where your kids are going to pass it down to their kids. And that is a lifelong journey, right? If legacy is not your thing and you just want to be happy and live your life somewhat like what I'm doing right now, traveling the world 1 month at a time in a different country, spending as much possible time with my 2-year-old and my wife, right? Sometimes we go a little crazy, but that's what we're trying to accomplish. Well, guess what? All you need to know is what that number is per month. How do you get that number per month? Whether that's through real estate, passive income, some sort of residual income, whatever your business may be.
Well, I think part of the struggle is figuring out the why, right? So I would say if I was thinking about my happiness threshold, I think I'm there. Like I think I have everything that I need, but I still love to work and I still work too much. Like I still have this problem of being the guy who it never shuts off. It's I still want to work 10 or 12 hours a day. It's just somehow in my DNA. And I'll be honest with you, it kind of burns me out. Like I go through these, ups and downs throughout a year where I work too much and I kind of burn myself out. Why
It,
am I doing this?
so this is another subject that I've been thinking about quite a bit. When I first started traveling, Matt, I found myself not doing a lot, right? And I started feeling extremely guilty. And it was a very, very bizarre feeling for me. I got into a place in my life where I could literally travel and not do a thing. And I felt bad about not doing a thing. And that was a very, very odd feeling. And it took months to really kind of, if not years at this point, it still comes up for me to better understand why that feeling was coming up. And I think it's a lot to do with who we are in our DNA. I agree with you, but I think it's a lot to do with capitalism, consumerism, and America in general, where this idea is that if you do not work, you are not who you're supposed to be. Right? Your work is so intertwined with who you are that if you're not working, you're useless. Why do you think people like my father, for example, when he retired a couple years ago, when this all happened, for the first year, he was depressed, right? He's like, what am I doing? It's like, didn't you just work your whole life to retire and now you feel bad about retiring? There's something wrong with that mentality. So I started thinking about that, but then I realized that no, there is something in our DNA that it needs to accomplish things, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
the feeling that
We
you're,
want to be challenged.
yeah, I think that's the
We
feeling
want
you're
to we
feeling
want
right
to
now.
feel like we have a purpose. And like after I sold my last company, I didn't work for a few months, and I dabbled with like how to lose money trading crypto because that's the only thing you can actually do, I think, and like other things. But I felt so much better when I was working again and working with other people. Like I had so much more energy just from that teamwork and collaboration, the challenge. Like I don't know, I just was way happier. I just felt kind of lost, I feel like, for that few months.
Yeah, and I think there is a hurdle to get over in that way, right? For me, it's now in a position where I feel like I need to accomplish things to feel happy. But I just find certain businesses, such as real estate or a couple hotels that we're building, or for example, the new podcast that we launched. These are things that are giving me joy and giving me accomplishment at the same time, but are not taking up 10, 12 hours out of my day, right? It's kind of like picking and choosing what I really want to do to make myself feel great and make like I'm feeling making an impact on the world, right? That's also something that all of us entrepreneurs have. We want to make an impact on the world, a positive impact, at least, unless you're a villain. But you know what I mean? So I think for me at this point in life, it's like finding things that I can make me feel accomplished throughout the day without it having take over my entire life. That's where I am now.
Well, I think it's to your point, it's about the activities or the hobbies. And I read something the other day that talked about as an entrepreneur, we need hobbies that give us energy. Like it could be going to the gym, it could be creative outlets, I play, you play in a band or you like to write books or whatever it is. Something that whatever that hobby is, it like gives you energy, it revitalizes you. And one of the things I always enjoy, and this may sound weird, is like weird manual labor. Like I enjoy like painting a room in my house or something. Like something about that is therapeutic to me. Like it's sort of brainless activity. I don't need to do any thinking. I'm just sitting there painting. And there's something therapeutic about that to me. I can't explain. And a year ago, I got sort of addicted to playing Zelda. And it's like I would play Zelda for 2 or 3 hours a day. And I don't know why, but I think that was like sort of therapeutic to me. Like it took my mind totally off work, totally distracted me from like everything else.
So I don't know much about Zelda, but I think I can understand the painting a lot because it's like you start with nothing and you end up with something. And it's literally in your hands. And there's
Yeah.
something really beautiful about that. I actually started getting into gardening as well too before I started traveling. And this idea that I planted this seed, I took care of this seed, it grew, and then I ate and I reaped the benefits of this thing from the land was so satisfying. But I mean, even like on a trivial perspective, my mother called me the other day and she was like, "Hey, my water heater is not working." I'm like, "Well, call a plumber. I don't know what the hell you want me to do." And she's like, "Well, come over here and check it out." I come over there. I started getting on some phone calls. I started doing some YouTube and blah, 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 blah. Long story short, I fixed the water heater. Okay.
Yeah.
Huge accomplishment. For the rest of the day, I'm telling my wife, "Did you know I fixed the water heater?" You know what I'm trying to say? And it sounds very stupid, maybe similar to painting a wall, but there's
Yeah.
something really beautiful about creating or fixing or something with your hands.
But part of it goes back to that feeling like the self worth, like value, like I did something, I accomplished something. Like we have that drive to, be valuable and do things.
But do you think that like all humans have that or only a specific amount of people have that?
I think most people do, right? Like most people do.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody does, but most people do.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where my thought was. Like my thought process is, it's like, can you find out what your happiness threshold is, accomplish that from a monetary perspective, right? And then the next phase is, how do you make sure that you're not just sitting around doing nothing, right? For me, it started out by making content. I was, as I told you, I was a marketer by trade, and all the companies that I've been involved with, I've been the marketing leg. So I decided to turn the marketing switch on for my own brand, and I started creating content of my travels and the things that I did. And I started getting called the Anthony Bourdain of TikTok. Like overnight, they were like, "Who is this guy?" Right? And that gave me joy. And it wasn't just the joy of the reaction of individuals that are following me that I don't even know, but it was the joy of interacting with restaurateurs, chefs, right? People who are like chasing down dolphins, fishermen. Like, I started to meet the most amazing people, and the catalyst was the content.
Well, I do want to take a second to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by Fullscale. If you need help doing software development, we help augment your team. If you have an existing team, we can provide more talent to help grow your team. You can check us out at fullscale.io. So we talk about that happiness threshold, and you have traveled the world. You've been to a lot of interesting places. I'm going to assume you've been to the Philippines, which I know, quite a bit about. I will be there next week. I If you think about happiness in all these other places, I'm sure you saw a lot of people in the Philippines that were very, very happy that live on less than $500 a month, right? And I think that's part of our problem is we all, especially as Americans, we are such consumers. We're after the Ferrari and the jet and all these different things. But there are a lot of people in this world that are extremely, extremely happy that are used to living in way lower, cost of living and means, like living on like $500 a month.
That always blows my mind, and not like in a derogatory way, in a more of like an admirable way, to be very honest with you. To be able to see individual, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of places that you'll go, and as well as I do, that you'll go, and it's it's poverty lines, and it's not in a good way, right?
There's people that are struggling for
Yeah.
sure.
But you're right. There are many places that I go, and that goes all the way from Europe to Dubai, where you see a lot of expats there who are making very, very low income, and even on the verge of, you can read the press on Dubai. Sometimes it's very bad. Almost like people say that it's like almost like pseudo slavery and stuff like that. I went to Dubai. Okay. I spoke to people who were from the Philippines or from Indonesia or from wherever in the Middle East, and have moved to Dubai and are not making a lot of money, and said this is the best place they've ever lived. Right. And this is a massive consumer luxury island in the middle of the world. Right. And these people are happy. So I don't know if it's necessarily living in a village in Philippines, or is it just being outside of America, to your point, right?
I think a lot of it is personality, attitude, just the way of life and perception, right? Like I see this with my wife's family. Like, some of her family members don't work, and I'm like, I don't understand. Why don't you guys work? And they're like, they don't have to work. They have a roof over their head and 3 meals a day. Other than that, they just don't care. It's like they have family, they're happy, they do whatever they want. Like they're like level of like what their happiness threshold is like at the very bottom.
Yeah.
It's like I have food to eat and I have shelter. That's it. That's their happiness threshold. And I think there are a lot of people like that.
Isn't there something beautiful about that? I mean, I
It
don't
is
know.
beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it's like, how do you define your happiness, right? I think this idea of consumerism has blocked us from understanding what is it that really makes us happy, right? I think like if you go to the blue zones, as I've been to a couple of them, it's like, dude, these guys, it's all about community, right? These guys are drinking, they're smoking, they're eating great, and they're hanging out, right? And they're living longer than everybody else. I think this idea of, figuring out how to live that perfect, healthy life, but then being so stressed out about
Right.
how you're going to pay your bills. I mean, I know guys who are making $500,000 a month, and they're spending $500,000 a month. You know what I mean? Like, we all know guys like that. And that's a very interesting mentality, right? That you could be making more money per month, 10 times more money per month than the average annual salary in America.
Yeah.
And still be month to month. There's something wrong, Matt. you know?
People always spend more money than they make, right? Like it doesn't matter how much you pay them, they inevitably will spend all of it. And to your point, I've known a lot of people this way, right? Like it's, well, the kids are in private school, we hired a nanny, we bought a jet, we bought a Ferrari, we go on these expensive vacations, we do all these things. Like you can spend the money. It's insane, but people can absolutely spend all of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I saw this Mr. Beast podcast. He was on a podcast. He's like, how I could spend 100 billion? I don't know what the number was, but I can spend $100 billion in a day. Like, how? You buy like 4 or 5 massive yachts, 4 or 5 massive planes, and you're done, dude. You know what I mean?
Well, so I'm curious, what are the thoughts you have about work life balance, entrepreneurs, and trying to figure out how do we set ourselves up for success and happiness without killing ourselves along the way?
Honestly, it always goes back to your own life goals, because if if you turn your own life goals into your company's life goals, guess what? Your work life balance is going to be non-existent. It's impossible. You know this. There's a company is a living, breathing thing, and its only mission in life is to grow, scale, and eat up all of its competitors. Right? I mean, for the most part, that's why businesses exist, at least in a
Yeah.
capitalistic country. Right? So if you don't shut that part off in your brain, you're never going to stop. It's only when you better understand what you're trying to accomplish with your family or your wife or your dog or long walks by yourself, whatever it may be, is when you're able to shut off your company's needs and put your needs before it. That's the
But there are
biggest thing.
definitely but there are definitely other things we can do, right? Like setting boundaries for how many hours we're going to work, prioritization, taking breaks, delegating. Like, I mean, there are definitely a lot of other things that we can do though
Oh,
that do help.
I agree, but unless they are motivated by specific things, at least this is how my brain works. I apologize. I'm talking obviously very subjectively, right? If I put rules for myself that have no meaning and they're just rules there, right? That's why I don't go to the gym. I'm like, oh, I should be going to the gym. I don't go to the gym because I don't really see the benefits of going to the gym, right? If the gym made me happy and I put that out there, then I'd be going to the gym, right? So for me, it's always about the why and the motivation behind it. Defining that first is then can give you the tools, like what you're saying, to create those rules. But if those rules are just there, clock out at 5 p.m., I'm breaking it every time, right? Oh, don't leave the house until 9 a.m. Why? Well, I need a why. Oh, I want to spend more time with my kids, right?
Right.
I literally want to make breakfast for my children. Okay, that's the reason why I can't leave the house till 9. So and that's the big thing for me in the way that my brain works. Because if I put these you know, rules in place that have no substance behind it, I'm going to break them 9 times out of 10, and then the company's going to take over. And guess what? By the way, let's be very honest. What makes you happy is extremely fluid, right? In a year from now, we can have another podcast episode between me and you, and everything that I'm saying right now could be changed, right? What makes me happy could be completely different. And I think that's really important for people to understand, right? The idea that what makes you happy is going to be the same for the rest of your entire life is not true, right? So I might wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? I want to grow a company, and that's what's really going to make me happy. And I'm going to be working 10, 12 hours a day. If that's truly what makes you happy, do it, man. You know?
Well, so for me, my goal is to grow my business. We've grown about 10% in the first quarter. Love to see us continue that, path. Like, hey, can we grow another 10% or 5 to 10% in the next quarter? Right. But it's at what point is enough, right? Is part of the problem, right? It's like, okay, I'm working hard to achieve that goal, but then I keep moving the goalpost, right? And so I think your point is like, Matt, if that is your goal, that's fine. You're going to work yourself to death to achieve that goal, but is that the wrong goal? Right. I think that's your point is like, well, Matt, your goal should be happiness and figuring out what is actually going to bring you happiness. Is like growing the business 10% really going to bring you happiness? Like that's a great goal, but is
Exactly.
that really going to bring you happiness to your life?
Yeah. And we had a really great HR consultant come in at one point during the growth of our company. And one of the things that he was saying to the executives was this idea of being up and out, right? When you're up and out, you have the ability to basically be the coach, for a lack of better words, right? You're not in the weeds growing specific. I mean, that's how companies scale, right? And how you're able to kind of free up some time for yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, and also help make sure that the company's the ship is moving in the right direction. The more you're in the weeds, the harder it is, right? And I think that if you're able to, if you can see that simultaneously in parallel, that you do want to grow your company 10% every single quarter for the next God knows how many years, right? But you do also want to bring down your own level of involvement. It's really becoming up and out. The only way to become up and out is to be able to replace yourself with really, really strong players. I mean, that's the only
Right.
way to be able to do both. But letting go as an entrepreneur, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is difficult, right?
So part of it is delegating, it's lowering your expectations and being patient, right? Like that's my frustration. Like I have all these things I'm trying to do at full scale with our marketing. Like I want to redo our website, I want to build this marketing automation thing, I want to do this thing, but I want it all and I want it now. Right. So to your point, the only way I'm going to get more happiness is to delegate this to really smart people, lower my expectations that they're not going to do it exactly perfect, but we'll figure it out. We'll make it work over time, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. And just being patient. Like, yeah, I could probably go kill myself this weekend and I could go do this thing and I could go figure it all out. Or I delegate it to somebody else and maybe it takes 2 or 3 weeks, but eventually it gets done. But I'm at a much lower stress level.
And probably nothing has changed.
And at the end of the day, like we get the same result. Like
You
a
get
year
the
from now,
same
the
result.
difference
It's
will
3
not have
weeks
mattered.
back. It's 3 weeks back, but you got the same result. And guess what? You got to go to the soccer game. You got to go some really cool dinners. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But I'm not wired that way. It doesn't work. I want it now. Right? Like that's the real problem though.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I think most entrepreneurs feel that way, and super successful people feel like that. But I also feel like maybe lowering expectations might be the wrong terminology, right? Maybe it's changing your expectations,
Yeah.
right? Because guess what? There are a lot of people that are extremely talented, right? Just as talented as you, as if not more. We're always learning, we're always growing. And so putting people like that in place, they might have a different vision. So it's like, if you want somebody to feel ownership in a position that you're placing them, especially at an executive level, it might not necessarily be lowering your expectations for what they're about to do. It's about changing their expectations,
Yeah.
right?
Sure. 100%. Well, and I don't know where to attribute this quote, but it's like if you can hire somebody and they can also do something like 80% as good as you can, like then that means they did it perfectly,
Yeah.
right? Because they're never going to do it quite your way. It's hard to say like lower expectation, but just sort of changing the expectation.
Yeah. And I think it's also like, as being a dominant person, you kind of feel like your way is the right way, or your way or the highway type. Not you specifically. I'm just talking about people in general that have that personality trait like myself. Like over the last 9 months, I have relinquished all control of my travel and things that I do to an AI travel assistant called Guide Geek. Okay. It's literally a free AI travel assistant that you just use WhatsApp or Instagram DM, and you ask it questions like you would ask Chat GPT, but it's specific to travel. Um, and it's literally chosen every single country I've visited and every city I visited over the last 9 months, and most of the time what I do or where I eat in those cities and countries. Point is, the reason why this is tying to what we were discussing is that it took a long time for me not to go and fact check and research and go back and do everything that this AI is supposed to do for me, that I would redo what it had already done at light speed, right? And then recently I've just been like, you know what? Let's just go to the restaurant. Let's just go do this. Let's just go. And it's been an experiment with Guide Geek. You know, we partnered with them to create content. But for me, it was a very, very big experiment, not only for myself and my own family, but also for people and humanity in general. You know, this is just one specific small trivial thing, traveling the world, blah, 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 but relinquishing control to an AI
Right.
to tell
Yeah.
you where to go and what to do, that to me felt intriguing. right? Am I this guinea pig now of what's going to happen in the future from all facets of life, whether that's marketing, film, employee, labor, whatever it may be,
So the one of the founders of that company was on the podcast before. I interviewed him before. I apologize, I don't remember his name, but
Ross.
they're very cool. They're a very cool company. There's all kinds of travel guides, like the rest of the business. But while we're sitting here, I'm going to the Philippines next week, so I actually went in there and I'm like, hey, what do I do in Bantayan Island? So I got a list of stuff here. So I've actually done some of these things before, so it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy to think that you can just pick up your phone and start communicating to an AI the way that you would communicate to a person. That's why I actually fell in love with Guide Geek. It was like I didn't have to download an app. I didn't have to sign up for anything. It would just felt so natural. And what's really interesting about it is that once you start communicating with it in a way where you would communicate with an expert or a friend that or a local, for a lack of better words, I'll be at a restaurant and I'll ask more information about that restaurant or about this cuisine or about this food. And then I start
Yeah,
learning about things that I never would have never would have heard of in my life.
very cool. Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today. I think today's topic was great, talking about work-life balance. I really love talking about the happiness threshold, and I really like the combination of the goals. Like, we really can't separate our work-life goals as entrepreneurs. I think that's really accurate. I don't think most people would have ever had that thought of it that way, but I think you're right. Like, we have to be honest and combine those goals together, especially if we have a family, and making sure we're all on the same page of like, what are our goals together here. So really, really appreciate you having you on the show today.
You're gonna everyone, entrepreneur or not, is gonna look back 10, 20 years from wherever you are right now in life. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to say, I wish I did this. I wish I did that. I wish I traveled more. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I could be able to hear my kid cry one more time. I want to pick up my kid one more time. And I think that's kind of where my mindset, how this all was birthed, right? My child was being born and my father was retiring and I was in the middle, right? And all these things were converging to this perfect storm. And I was like, wait, hold up a second. He's retiring. He's not happy that he's retiring. My kid's being born. I want to spend more time with my kid. So, long story short, take a breath. It's going to be okay. Go eat at that fancy restaurant. You know what I mean? Go test drive that Porsche on the track. Just live a little bit.
Let's do it. All right. Well, once again, this was Michael Motamedi. You want to tell us again about your podcast?
Yeah, it's No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, where we interview literally the most extraordinary individuals all across the globe in their element. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. And if you follow me at Michael Motamedi on TikTok or on Instagram, you're going to see clips on there and also see my travels.
Yeah, I was looking at some of your videos from the Philippines. So I was checking out the balut. Did you eat the balut?
I did.
You ate it. All right.
I
That was very good. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it, brother.
All right. Take care.